I'd now like to introduce Carolyn Rowe from Lawa to come up and give us an overview of what that's all about.
Hopefully we're all sorted. I've already been in trouble for not using national standards and using PowerPoint as my presentation method, but anyway. So we're probably going to take a bit of a turn at this moment. I am not a data manager. I don't pretend to be a data manager. So I have, for the past 2 years, been project managing the EMA project, so Environmental Monitoring and Reporting, which Lawa is obviously the kind of end point of that project. So with that in mind, I appreciate that many of you here, particularly from the regional council sector, probably have an involvement with Lawa towards the end, probably 2 weeks out prior to a module launch, when you get given a data spec on your desk and say, we have to deliver data in this format to Lawa. So I have been on the receiving end of some of your phone calls. And I suspect that you possibly don't have an appreciation of where Lawa's come from, or where the EMA project has come from, where Lawa sits in that. Why are we doing this in the first place? And where are we heading to? So I'm going to give you the background to that, and then we'll talk about what's kind of currently on Lawa, where we're going. And then Sean and Alison are here to take your data questions. And I'll facilitate that. Those of you who've been around the regional sector long enough may remember Lawns. Yes, it's a slightly different name to Lawa. Land, Air, Water, New Zealand. So this kind of came about 2009, 2010. So I started with Horizons in 2010, and it was certainly kind of well under development at that point. So the kind of background to this is the Environmental Defence Society was starting to gain a bit of traction. The EPA had just been established. Nick Smith was making some noises around amalgamations, what was the value of the regional sector, and I think for the first time regional councils felt threatened in their role in the world. And I think it was a sudden realisation of, we have to demonstrate what our value is. We collect, all this important data, we manage, the commons, we're responsible for all of the stuff, but no one really knows about it. We weren't, and probably still aren't, particularly good at communicating our science, and I think Sean touched on that earlier. Those of you that saw the prototype of Lawns, we probably didn't get that quite right either in terms of communicating the science. So in all credit to those that were involved with that, it was initially a science-led prototype, and the science that they did develop is pretty much what's on the State of Environment Rivers section of Lawa now. So a lot of that work didn't go to waste, and was certainly utilised. So that was kind of 2009, 2010. Meanwhile, there were conversations happening in other parts of the world. So the Cawthron Institute was looking at ways that they could promote what was going on in the water quality space. And Sir Stephen Tindall, owner of the warehouse, was also looking at ways to invest to improve water quality. So urban legend goes something like this. Stephen Tindall had a couple of international visitors over with him, and he was fishing, Jeff, in the Tukituk. And his guests caught some trout, and a local said, you can't eat those, you're not going to let them eat those. And he went, well, why not? You can't possibly, this river's polluted, your guests will get sick if you eat this trout. So poor Stephen Tindall was kind of left going, well, I don't know if this is true, where can I check this, what do I do? He's not going to try and give food poisoning to his international guests. So he was pretty embarrassed, and then struggled to kind of go, well, how can I find out this information? So he was talking to a commercial company around what they could potentially do in the space. We caught wind of this and decided that we would pitch Lawns to him to kind of say, hey, we'd really like you to come alongside this and invest in what we termed then the socialisation of Lawns, but essentially communicating the science. So we knew that what we had in the science end was pretty robust, but we knew that it wasn't engaging with your everyday consumer. And certainly Stephen Tindall was pretty quick to see that when we presented Lawns to him, but he loved the concept. Cawthron Institute had been talking to him as well, so he partnered us up with them, and basically said, look, I'm sorry, but you are a local government entity, and we need some independence, some trust and credibility. So will you guys partner with Cawthron Institute? So essentially, Lawa was born at that point.
Everyone in New Zealand has an interest in the quality of our fresh water. We each use, on average, 200 litres a day. It's home to around 50 species of freshwater fish, 2/3 of which are threatened. It grows our food, it powers our businesses, and we enjoy it in our leisure time. There is a lot of information out there and a lot of research going on involving a lot of people. Regional councils joined with the Cawthron Institute, the Ministry for the Environment and Massey University, and with support from the Tyndall Foundation, developed Lawa to share information all in one place. Regional councils collect samples from over 1,100 sites in New Zealand, which are analysed by the council scientists and the Ministry for the Environment. The Cawthron Institute checks the data has been collected, processed and analysed against best practice guidelines. An open lab at Massey University asked river users what they wanted Lawa to be, then used design to bring the science to you in an easy-to-understand format. Lawa connects you with information about the quality of our water at all levels. It shares water quality data with you and tells you where you can go to enjoy our rivers. Visit Lawa to meet your rivers and share your stories. lawa.org.nz, connecting you with New Zealand's rivers.
So that was where we got to by the end of 2012, and certainly are working on this premise of connecting you with rivers, or soon to be connecting you with your environment as we launch into other modules. So at that point, MFE also joined the partnership in a limited capacity, kind of seeing that there was the opportunity for them to have some data on there, or some national context. So what is the national picture in this space? Obviously, Lawa was aggregating up the regional data. So MFE came in, and in 2013 we launched this to the public. It was Amy Adams, I think at that point, was our minister, and she launched this, and it certainly had really high profile with the ministers, whoever they have been, of the Minister of Environment at the time, and throughout the process, and they've been very supportive, which has been great. So bearing in mind this is now 2013, down in Wellington, whilst we were working on Lawa, MFE was working with Stats NZ on the environmental reporting bill. So essentially a legislative process, and I don't know if Alison's going to talk about it later or not. She is going to talk about it later. That's good, because I don't want to pretend that I can talk about the environmental reporting bill. But what you'll see there is domain reports. It sounds, a little bit, okay, boring, but just lock that one away, because the domain reports have a pretty big impact on how the EMA project is structured. So domain reports every 6 months, 3-year synthesis report. Obviously last week they just released their first one. And to be able to do these, Stats NZ and MFE need to have accessible and standardised data for them to be able to do their job in terms of national reporting. Obviously that impacts the regional sector, because a lot of that data is coming from us. So it made sense for us to work together, and we entered into the Environmental Monitoring and Reporting Framework pretty much the same time as we launched Lawa. We quickly realised that Lawa was essentially the TV set at the end of this process, and that's kind of how we talk about it. But there's a huge amount that has to happen in the background, or has to progress in the background, because it doesn't all happen before it gets onto Lawa. So Lawa became part of this bigger framework. So essentially the principles are up there that we operate under. We're a partnership between MFE and the regional sector, predominantly. It's around integrating our regional national networks. There's nothing worse from a consumer's point of view, or the public's point of view, to get one story from either Lawa or a regional council, and then what seems like a conflicting message from MFE's website, because they're using a slightly different protocol or different data set. It's obviously really frustrating. It's probably very frustrating for CRRs out there, certainly frustrating from a media point of view. So standard monitoring protocols and methods. Again, Alison's going to talk to you about NEMS later on. So NEMS, whilst being a distinct project to EMA, it's certainly very integrated and very much one of the backbones of making EMA successful. National Federated Data System. So yeah, I mean, that's essentially why you guys are here today, really. I mean, that's kind of your gig, but, you know, how do we make the data automated? How do we transfer it seamlessly? I love that word. Between organisations, how can MFE pick up the data without having to go to each individual council and then run some kind of process over that to standardise it? Open access to data. I was going to mention we talked about lawns, so Paul, you'll have a sharp intake of breath. So when we first developed lawns, there was a number of chief executives that had the data firewalled. So you could read the stories about what was going on, but you couldn't actually access the data, let alone download it. So we've come a long way in a really short space of time, and I think when you see where we've got to with LAWA, you have to appreciate the background that we came from of, you know, it's our data, we don't want to let anyone see it. We've moved a long way in a short space of time. Another bugbear, and I did have to smile, Wayne, when you talked about making sure that, you know, there was significant investment and adequate investment. And something that I receive a lot of gripes about in my role. This project is largely done on existing investment, so it utilises staff time, it utilises existing projects like NEMS. Obviously there's, you know, different funding sources that we try to tap into, whether there's MB grants available, EnviroLink, tools. NEMS obviously has its budget to do its thing. There is a very small LAWA development budget, and then 0.6 project manager. So that's essentially all the funding that's currently available for EMA. So yes, it is another thing to add to your day job, but hopefully in the long run you'll see the benefit for your council. And then obviously a nationally facing reporting platform, so essentially that's LAWA. It's the fancy words for LAWA. Obviously we have a governance group and a steering group. You can find your representatives there if you are, but essentially they are a replication of the environment, the CEs that are responsible for environment management, and then the RMG reps by and large. Under that, we've got the project teams, and this is where the domain reports come back in. So they model the domain reports. So we, you know, have water quantity, air, water quality, groundwater, they're all up there, good, coast, land, and biodiversity. So essentially how that works, we have a lead council for each project, and they have 2 support councils. And so they have been decided on by the RMG, so the Resource Managers Group, and they are supported by the SIGs, the Special Interest Groups, so the likes of SWIM or LAMEG, as Sean mentioned earlier. Arguably, Sean might be heading up this group to form some kind of SIG in the data management space. So they're essentially tasked with scoping out the data. What are the data sets available? What do we need to have available down the track long term? Where do we need to have standardisation? Where do NEMS need to be focusing? How are we going to transfer the data? What is the common language that we're going to use? And then, you know, down into working with the LAWA project manager, or the EMA project manager, our web developers and our designers to actually translate this into what's it going to look like when it gets out onto the web. So all that work essentially happens in those project teams. The more engaged the special interest group is, the more you as a council, if you're not one of those support or lead councils, will probably be involved. And one of the other things I tend to feel, you know, calls once we've got data on LAWA is, why have you done it that way? And, you know, shouldn't you be using this particular standard and all the rest of it? All of that happens down at the project team. So, if you want to get involved in that kind of detail, then talk to your SIG or talk to those lead councils, and I can certainly share who those lead councils are with you if you're interested. And we want to capture that enthusiasm. You know, if you want to, influence what ends up being on LAWA, that's where you need to get involved. And then obviously we've mentioned NEMS. The only other thing I'd say about NEMS is, yes, everyone would like a NEMS standard for everything right now. And, Alison will probably mention, but, there's a small budget, and obviously we're utilising a huge amount of goodwill by council staff and CRI staff and MFE staff. So, the list is long and we'll get there when we can, but there's still a lot of standardisation that can be done in absence of having a NEMS, and then NEMS can come over top at the end, hopefully, in an ideal world. So Lawa, putting the rest of EMA to one side. Now I need to update my vision slide, I've realised, because we talk about freshwater only, but let's pretend that freshwater says environment. So essentially the goals of LAWA are obviously to improve public's awareness of the issues. We want it to be credible and robust, and transparency. Cawthron's role in being an independent validator is obviously key in that, but access to the data is also key in that, and access to quality controlled data is obviously crucial. When we first envisaged LAWA, we wanted it to be the hub for essentially freshwater, but eventually all environmental things. So we want the public to eventually, to view LAWA like they view NIWA. You don't need to have NIWA spelled out in terms of what the acronym means. That's where you go. That Met Service is where you go to get a weather forecast. That's the kind of space we want LAWA to head. It's certainly gaining traction media-wise with that, but we've still got a long way to go. And obviously a user-friendly interface, so that's around, again, communicating the science. Here's where some views might differ. So what does success look like? So we've got some thumbs there. I'm being cut half full today. So we are seeing increased understanding of the issues, and back in kind of 2009-10, we were seeing, the media headlines around poor water quality, worst rivers in the world, all the rest of it. Obviously things, are degrading, but there's a lot of issues being taken out of context. LAWA allows users to go in and see the monitoring at a specific site near them for all the parameters and understand it for themselves, and not have just that media blinkered view. So we're certainly seeing that start to move. Transparent access to the data for the scientist. I think we've improved in that space, but we probably have a long way to go. Increased community engagement through stories and events. Here's my bugbear for the comm staff, and you can take this back to your comm staff, but LAWA is essentially a communications tool, and it doesn't have great uptake with the communications managers across the country. They should be using this to promote events, environment-related stories, getting the communities to do the same. This is key for citizen science. If you've got a school that's done some monitoring, get them to write up a wee story, put it up on LAWA. It's the perfect place for that kind of stuff. It obviously supports video, imagery, all that kind of stuff. The more ownership we can get from the comms teams to kind of take this on, the more we can kind of push that space, and that's also going to obviously increase traffic and get more people looking at the data and understanding what's there. In terms of collaboration between partners, the public and other groups, I think we're moving really quickly and really well in this space. Just with the launch of the Lakes module a couple of months ago, we've now got the provision of NIWA data via the Lake Spy. So we've now got NIWA more in the tent than they were. We obviously had a little bit of the SOE river data on there before, but certainly they're starting to share their data via LAWA. DOC and Landcare are very much involved in the land and biodiversity project teams. We're a wee way down the track for their LAWA module, but there's certainly discussions, and we're working with those agencies. More and more people are looking at, could they utilise LAWA for their data, which is great. So in terms of progress to date, hopefully all of you are familiar with what is on LAWA and what your council is showing on LAWA. We obviously started with the river quality SOE monitoring, so I think we've just done our third refresh of that for LAWA just last month. And this time around included the macroinvertebrate community index. So the bugs and the streams. December last year we launched the bathing beaches, so huge public uptake from the bathing beaches, probably what we've got the most interest in, and come next week you'll all be doing your monitoring again and putting on your bathing beach, it's totally a plug, putting on your bathing beach data. The asterisk ones are ones where we've got automation up and running, so bathing beaches, about half of you guys are doing this via a Hilltop link, and it's a beautiful thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if it is on your end, but hopefully. So lake quality went up same time as MCI, went live same time as MCI in September. Water quantity and live data, which is obviously missing an asterisk, it's clearly automated. So yeah, water quantity wasn't without its huge efforts required, both from the Lawa project team but also from you guys, and we're fully aware of that, and we'll talk about some learnings in a minute. But in terms of data transfer, a huge piece of work, and essentially we are able to transfer that data to other agencies like MFE, or I think it was Opus or MB that have requested it. And pretty exciting to be able to get live flow, rainfall, groundwater level data from 16 different agencies and have that showing live on Lawa. So we're pretty excited about what we've achieved with that, despite it being a huge effort. We obviously have our news and events section, our learn section where there's a whole heap of fact sheets, glossary terms, probably more designed at this kind of school, university, kids that want to find out more about what's going on. And then this year we launched our River of the Month. Again, being a comms person, I'm interested in that kind of thing. So we've got a nice, touchy-feely videos that once a month we focus on a river hero, so essentially a community group that's, doing great stuff. So again, this is funded by the Tyndall Foundation because he's really keen to see that ownership in the community around, water quality being everyone's responsibilities, not the responsibility of a regional council solely to sort. So, learnings along the way. I think where we haven't worked hard enough is to get engagement probably from the likes of you guys and your scientific counterparts and obviously the comm staff, despite our best efforts. So this is a really well supported project by the chairs, by the mayors, by the CEs, growing in its support at the RNG level. And certainly they're very aware, and they get a lot of report, and we spend a lot of time working with them on what we're doing. I'm increasingly aware that that is not filtering down to the staff that are tasked then with complying with the data spec and getting the data onto Lawa. So we will endeavour to try, I say we, I'm moving off the project, but the project will endeavour to try to push that further, but I'd also say whatever you can do within your own council to set that up. So Canterbury, it's my favourites at the moment, they've got the beautiful system going, so they've appointed someone that is essentially the key Lawa contact. Any Lawa or email related requests goes through to that person and they farm it off to the right person within the organisation. So it's then their responsibility. Hopefully then staff are getting enough time to be able to meet the requirements and are not getting, sent the data spec 2 weeks or 2 days in some cases, Sarah, prior to it going on the website. So that model is happening in a couple of other councils and is working really well. So it's something I'd certainly encourage you to take back and say, how are we, dealing with interaction with the email team, and could we improve that? And we'll certainly try to make sure that we're getting the information to the right people as well. This other one's really interesting. I hear a lot, what is it that you Lawa people want, or, what do we need to do, and all of that. And, I've been operating as an independent contractor for the last 2 years, and I'm kind of just like, you guys are Lawa, this is your product. This is, regional councils are the core funders of this this website. It was your initiative back in, from that 2009 Lawns prototype. And I just encourage you to take greater ownership and get involved in those project teams, get involved in your special interest groups, make sure that's happening at your regional council, because that is where you're able to influence. And just, embrace it as yours. It's not a government initiative. They're obviously a key partner, and it's not me as a contractor, it is you guys. Everything takes longer than planned. I don't know if I need to say anything more. But I guess the only other thing I'd say from a water quantity point of view, for those of you that were involved in that module, whilst we did send that data spec out for review, we did it at Christmas time last year, which was probably not ideal, and we sent it to the LAMEG group, which probably didn't touch a lot of those that are responsible for the data. We didn't get any feedback on that, and we took that as permission to proceed. I think we will get feedback this time from the pure process that we went through last time, but we'll certainly try harder to solicit it as well. So Sean's certainly building his data team that's going to support the data spec. Wayne's been heavily involved in the data spec, so air quality is the next one off the rank, and ECAN are leading that. So we're certainly taking the learnings from water quantity as we move into automating air quality. But yeah, if you get the opportunity to comment at a review stage, please do, because that's the time to influence how things are set up on our web developers' end. It's very difficult for us to change that down the track, but much easier when we're in the formation of the data spec. We also sent you out the data spec without the designs. And it's largely, because I'm in the design comms phase and Sean's in the tech phase, and we were happily, going about our business. We were both aware of what the other person was doing, but we asked you guys to provide data without you knowing how that data was then going to be presented. Well, certainly we have the wireframes. They're sitting on my desk, so they can certainly go out with the data spec, so you guys see a bigger picture, I think. So what lies ahead? We're just in test phase at the moment with improvements to the navigation and mapping. So at the moment, I don't know if you've played much on Lawa, you have to kind of drill down to a particular module. You might want to look at water quality in a river, and then you might want to look at water quantity. You can't look at water quantity at the same river without coming back out to the top of your region and drill back down, which is not ideal. It's also very difficult to navigate between regions. So a little bit of that is intentional whilst we have some variance in standards. So we've just got to be careful if you're comparing swimmability of beaches in Taranaki to swimmability of beaches in Auckland. The methods are slightly different. So there is a little bit of intention about that. But, at the moment you can't see, you might be travelling up the coast, Coromandel to Auckland, and you're surfing your way up and you want to know the beach quality. You can't see where the monitored beaches are in Auckland without jumping back out, going back into Auckland. So we're working on those improvements at the moment. Obviously I've mentioned air quality, so we're trying to go live for Air Quality 1 May next year, obviously to time with winter, when we're going to get the most immediate uptake of that. The data spec is almost at a point that it can go out for your review. Groundwater quality, so Hawke's Bay will be leading groundwater quality, and we're trying to get that up before June 30th. We've had a change in personnel there, so we just need to talk about the timeframes with them. I haven't put a timeframe on this one. Sean might, indicate no, he's not going to give you a timeframe, but obviously we want to automate the state of environment, river, lake, MCI, water quality stuff, eventually, soon, in a few years. And then 2016-17 will begin the land and biodiversity. Those of you that are aware of the biodiversity and land monitoring in your own council will know that it's huge. Will know that the variance between councils is even greater. So those are two really big pieces of work, but we want to get started with what's available, so there'll probably be 3 indicators in each of those spaces as a start. Just want to leave you with something just to motivate you. So this is from Sam Judd, who runs Sustainable Coastlines but also writes for the Herald. Whilst it might at times or all the time seem like just another thing that you're required to do in your role, Lawa is gaining traction and is really well thought of out there by a lot of kind of influencers in the environment space. From my interactions with the Minister, he's really supportive of it, or certainly has been in the past. And Sean mentioned earlier that, we've got opportunities with NASA. Internationals are looking at this, looking at what's been done on a national scale, which we're unaware has been done anywhere else. Obviously, we're a small country, so we've got some benefits there. But it is a really exciting project to be involved in. And I just encourage you to make the most of that opportunity. Sean and I can take questions.
What age group is the website pitched at?
Everyone. The way the website's been designed is that we try to provide the simplest information at the top level, and then you've got to drill down to get the detail. Had budget allowed us, we would have had an interface that would have allowed you to select what type of user you were. So if you were a scientist, you probably would have gone straight into the data. Potentially similar for policy analysts. Farming would have gone in with a different view to a school-aged group. So, it's trying to be fairly generic to try and capture all of that, because we don't have budget to allow us to do that.
I've got two questions. Firstly, did we capture the costs associated with doing this? Because obviously there is a large cost to everyone for doing this, but I think the output's just been amazing. And if we want to try and do something like this again, do we know how much effort and cost? So that was my first question. And the second question was, you mentioned earlier about the environmental reporting. And going forward, does this mean that we'll need to do less environmental reporting because a lot of it will be done through this, and therefore we'll be getting efficiencies as a result of this? Again, the value-added benefit. So that was my two.
Okay. So obviously in terms of costs, we're tracking what the office spends, but I think you're probably referring to staff time. Yeah, that's not reported on to the governance. And I'd imagine that different councils run that different ways depending on how they're sucking up the lower time and whether or not they've actually, put that into their annual plans and their LTPs. So it's something I can certainly take back and ask the governance if that's something that they want to consider doing. But it may mean some changes for councils in terms of how they're reporting and how they're categorising their spend. But I'm happy to take that back if that's, And then the second question was around environmental reporting. Alison might be, I'll give it a go, and Alison might jump in. Obviously, the government is going to have to do their national reporting, and we're still going to have to provide data for that as regional councils. So in terms of data collection, I don't see that, certainly not downscaling. If anything, it's probably going to show us where the gaps are, and then we need to have a discussion about how those are filled and funded. But in terms of reporting within your own council, there's certainly some councils that are opting to use lower. And that might be increasingly so. But obviously we can't be completely tailored to one specific council's needs. So given that there's the regional flavour, I guess it's really going to come down to your council and what they want to do and whether lower meets your needs for that.
It was more whether it met the reporting requirements needs, if not the regional council.
Right.
Where, they could just pull the information straight from WAWA to say, go out to each regional council 16 different times.
Yes.
That's the idea, and that I think that's where everybody would like to get to. Councils receiving fewer requests from us, honestly, and not multiple requests, which I think unfortunately happened over the last year for the same data from different people. So I think the overall aim is to absolutely that we're not duplicating, we are lining up as best we can, but there will be sometimes some slight differences in what LAWA has decided to go and where we need to go, just because the difference in priority, regional, national reporting. But absolutely the idea is let's not duplicate and let's save ourselves some time and effort.
Hi, Nick Ward, Environment Southland. So recently looking on LAWA, we've also done analysis of our data using the same data set, and it's showing different things because we've done a flow adjusted, and that does not seem to be the case on LAWA. Have you got that in your sort of sights, thinking about that going forward? Because my concern is there may be different messaging, which we don't want to be.
Yep. Yeah, and I certainly know from your perspective that Adrian's quite aware of that and has certainly made that clear throughout the website. And again, that kind of comes back to your comms. And MCI has been a classic example of the nervousness around putting the MCI stuff, because NIWA's approach is quite different to a lot of councils. That is the type of conversations that need to be had through SWIM in the water space, because that's where we're trying to seek that consistency and that standardisation. At the end of the day, a decision needs to be made, though, and there are going to be, I hate to call them winners and losers, but there are going to be, somebody's method's going to be adopted. Hopefully, in most cases, it's the majority. But yeah, so the time to influence those decisions is certainly in that project planning phase through your special interest group or through the lead and support councils.
Thanks.
In your NEMA slide, you spoke wistfully about a nationally federated data set. What's complicated about it? It's implementable.
I'll try to get there. No, I won't get there.
Today.
Sean, what's complicated about it? It's what today's about, isn't it?
The capability is certainly within councils today, and certainly within the water quantity space, we've shown that we've got a nationally federated system there. We can basically form the same query to the different servers and get equivalent data back from all those agencies. But it's not just with water quantity, we're looking at it across the different domains, air, biodiversity, land, and it's a lot of research to be done. There's also a lot of consistency that needs to be added to the data underlying it. And we've got to make sure we've got the context, we make sure we've got the quality there, make sure we understand the history of the data. So there's lots of issues with council data that's held as a result of legacy systems, of staff changes. It's a matter of getting the data into a state where it's ready to federate, where councils are ready to share it and make it available more generally across the domains that they operate under, or operate across. So yeah, the capabilities there is just actually us getting all our data ducks lined up in a row. But the capability is certainly available today.
Hi. You said just now about the communication managers in most regional council was not really there's very poor uptake to go into the LAWA. Just a suggestion. A lot of the comms manager are now also on more social media platform. A lot of the things we're doing now are trying to hop on to Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, and LAWA is another link to that actually. But LAWA doesn't have that social media link at the moment, does it?
I'd be happy to take a petition from all of the sector to the governance group around that.
Great presentation. Regarding the federated system, so you're collecting data sets from the councils and obviously also from the CRIs, and I know Jen has also been a little bit reluctant about it, but if you serve sort of as a proxy towards MFE, for example, how's the licensing or between the different data sets possibly and the different providers and the liabilities sort of propagated throughout your process?
Alison?
I was wondering if is everything CC licensed, or do the CRIs do differently than the councils?
The NIWA data that we have on there at the moment is CC licensed, and we certainly have permission from them to use it in the way that it's being used.
Then the liability is taken care under disclaimers. So we say we can't take responsibility for the way you're using our data. We have talked about licensing. I'm trying to remember where that got to. Sorry, can you recall?
Yeah, we've never taken anything formal to the governance.
No, that's right.
Yeah, certainly something that I was challenged about this morning to say, well, what are we communicating in terms of our licensing and how can people use LAWA data? But the principles of EMA is that it is open data, free for use. So I can't see that the governance having a view that is different to that. Mm.
I think honestly, it's just a case of, as Caroline says, taking a recommendation up to the government's group and getting it.
Is it attributed on the website?
Pardon?
Is it attributed on the website?
I don't believe it is.